Welcome into Inside Carolina's special pre-season fall camp, first day of school practice. I'm Tommy Ashley, that's Jason Staples. We're sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt. That was a long-winded way, Jason, to say it's day one. Day one.
Opening day.
Opening day. Mac Brown, just heard from him, reference that in the press conference after practice. Opening day, it's always great. Opening day, Jason.
Yeah, and we were going to do what, 5 things that stood out?
Five things. So I'll let you as you listen to this, guess what the 5 are. I'm going to start with tempo. Bet you that was not on your bingo card, but Jason, I thought the tempo of this practice is more than we've seen from North Carolina in years past.
That was by far my number one takeaway from this practice. Was there have been a number of times over the years where I've felt that Carolina's practice tempo was not as high as it needed to be. And you know, I've talked about this before. This is not news to everybody, but you know, I've said, look, I've been at practices at Clemson, at Florida State, at other places where you're talking about actual contenders at a national level, and when you see the level of urgency that those programs, when they're at their peak, practice with, and the number of reps that they get in practice. There were times where they were getting, you know, double the number of reps in practice that players in some Carolina practices were getting. And I came out today and went, these guys are getting a bunch of reps.
Absolutely.
The tempo was really turned up. You know, Mac talked about this, and this will be one of our other ones as well, but he talked about this as, look, you got more depth. When you've got more depth, you can go faster and you can get more reps in because guys are getting a little bit more rest between snaps. And you can divide drills differently because you're not killing everybody in one position group if you divide it up, and now you're too thin to do it. They've got enough depth to do that. I think also the situation with having the analysts able to coach today.
Absolutely.
And Carolina was not one of those programs where the analysts coached it, as soon as the practice went closed anyway. And that there were programs where that was the case, where, the analysts really just directly coached anyway. Carolina was not one of those programs. There are workarounds where, you might have an analyst say to another coach,
as the player standing
player's standing over there and says, hey, I noticed his butt's coming up a little bit in his break. You need to coach him on that. There's no need for any of that chicanery anymore. Now they can directly coach, and they've got some really good analysts.
They do.
You think about Clyde Christensen. There aren't very many quarterback coaches in the country like that.
With a better resume than that.
Right. Nobody has a better resume than that. So now all of a sudden you've got him working with your quarterbacks directly, running the individual part of that, and directly able to talk to them. That allows other coaches to more directly monitor and coach alongside, and to Chip Lindsey's he's working from one group to another.
Yep.
And he's not having to stay with one group the whole time. He's able to go with them, and then he sees something else that he likes or that he doesn't like, and he can go and deal with that right away somewhere else. And that just allows the tempo to elevate that much more. But I thought even beyond that, it clearly must have been a point of emphasis for Mac Brown and for the staff to come out. And, I wonder how much the new defensive coordinator is a factor in this, in terms of just how he likes to amp things up and how he likes to run fast as a defensive unit. I wonder how much that's also a factor coming into the fall after the spring. But I thought that was one of the most noticeable things about practice today.
I did too, and one thing we'll talk about when we get to the end is there was a lot of guys out here. They've got a lot of coaches, a lot of analysts, but they have a lot of players too. We'll talk about that in just a second. You mentioned Clyde Christensen. I thought it was interesting. Today, Randy Clements was out of practice, a little under the weather, not here. Chip Lindsey was able to work with the offensive line some because Clyde Christensen had the quarterbacks. And the quarterbacks, of course, is what everybody's going to talk about for North Carolina this year. It's natural. I think the offensive and defensive line are going to be bigger factors, but we're going to talk about the quarterbacks for number 2. And Jason, if I'm honest, I had strong opinions going into this. I don't really have a strong opinion about who I think is the guy. We're a long ways from that decision being made. Mac said probably 10 days before Minnesota they want to have it, for press reasons and familiarity reasons and knowing who the leader is. But today, there was some good and bad for all three.
Yeah, there were some ups and downs. One thing I will say, to kind of paraphrase Rick Pitino, Drake May ain't walking through that door, right? And Carolina fans have been really spoiled with the last couple quarterbacks that they've had.
Yep.
Very few programs get to have a Sam Howell and a Drake May back to back. Most programs don't have one of those guys in a decade. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden going from 5 years of that, 5 years of Sam Howell and Drake May.
Yep. NFL quarterbacks.
These are, and the last one is a guy that, in a few years might be, kind of NFL MVP level type player in terms of the talent that he brought out here. What we saw today was not that, and we didn't expect to see that. Mm-hmm. So, I think one of the things that was apparent is offensively, they know what they're going to be. And you can already see kind of they're going to be very play action heavy. They're going to run the football. Some of those things came out. There's some dinking and dunking going on. This is something we were commenting on, that the dunk show was
Dunk City.
It was Dunk City.
It's not at Gulf Coast. It's in North Carolina.
Yeah,
Dunk City.
Dunk City was in the Carolina practice today, because the completed passes in practice today were all of the short variety as a rule, and a lot of that had to do with our number 3. But we'll get to that in a moment. But I thought all 3 of the quarterbacks had their moments. Criswell, I thought, struggled more than the other 2 in terms of consistency. There were some things you could tell he had not been through the drills that they do here in terms of how they coach drops. Christensen has specific stuff, the way that he does things. You could tell that Criswell had not gone through some of those things. He didn't have a full spring, and that was evident.
Yep.
You could see that the other 2 had improved from the spring on some of those areas. But Criswell also made a few of the biggest wow throws in some of the drills of the guys. Mm-hmm. So, the height is here. But on the flip side, you look at somebody like Max Johnson, and Johnson, I thought, was the guy that hit it to the middle of the green pretty much the whole practice.
We talked about that in our quarterback scouting overview. Fairways and greens, and I think Max Johnson is that guy. Yeah,
and he, I thought, was the most consistent of the 3 in the on-air drills in terms of ball placement, in terms of, the basic mechanics, which is not surprising. It's kind of what we expected. Yeah. And then, you had another, you had Harrell that was, I think, between the 2. He didn't have a bunch of mistakes. He didn't, but he, I think, made a couple more wow throws actually than Johnson made. But then when you got into Skell, I thought he was the one guy in past Skelly where there was one that kind of he put in danger, and that's one that they're going to mark on the sheet. Yep. So all 3 of those guys, you walk out going, okay, college level, this level player, yes, can win with that guy, but also a lot to work with after day 1. And honestly, that's kind of what we expected. So. I don't think we're any closer to having a sense of who the starter should be or will be at this point than we were when we came in, but that's really to be expected after first short day practice.
Yeah, and a couple things Max said, and I just want to expound on it before we go to number 3. Depth charts are not going to be moved in shorts. He talked about that, so that is coming. Pads go on later in the week or first part of next week. And also, I think what's interesting, and this is something we can expand on deeper into the podcast schedule as we get closer to the season. These guys have 3 different skill sets, and they're going to have to shape whatever offensive game plan or play calling based on those skill sets. It's not going to be, you've got Max Johnson, he goes out, you put in Connor Harrell, and it's the same. There's going to be some shifting there. It involves the offensive line, and it involves what they can do well and what they can't do well, and it involves everything. The one thing that we'll just go ahead and, since it was the Drake May part of the show every time last year, Omarion Hampton, just turn around and get the ball to Omarion Hampton. That's going to be a big part of this.
The one offense. Clear touchdown that we would have seen, that would have been a touchdown in pads, would have been a touchdown in anything, was a screen pass to Omarion Hampton.
Yeah, and he caught it.
He caught it. Yeah, that seam was there, and it wouldn't have mattered who else was out there. He was going to score.
Yeah, and so you got 3 quarterbacks who they have that security blanket to be able to do that. But let's talk about why the quarterbacks may have struggled a little bit today. And I'm going to be honest. I was surprised to see 93 be one of those guys, and that's Jacoby Cowan. He played really well. Rodney Laura, redshirt freshman, played really well. You saw a couple others. Just the defensive tackles, for me, and there's names we won't mention for obvious reasons, but the defensive tackles played well today, I thought.
Yeah, well, and it's caveat that, again, it's giant, enormous asterisk here, because we're talking about guys in shorts.
Yeah.
Like, this is, I could go all Allen Iverson on this. We talking about shorts, man. We talking about shorts. Not a game, not even pads. We talking about shorts. Talking about shorts All-Americans here. Nevertheless, there are certain things that do carry over from shorts.
Right.
And one of them is quickness. And how quickly do you move your feet? And you mentioned two of the three that stood out to me. We talked about this before we went on. I turned to you at one point in the practice and said, we're going to see a lot of Jacoby Cowan this year. Because
he has worked.
He has put in the work, and he looked significantly better today than I've seen him at Carolina. He's taken a step forward in terms of just the movement skills and some of the things. And I think they're going to move him around. I think he's a guy that they're actually planning for, knowing what they've got elsewhere on the defensive line. So I think that's one takeaway. I think another, you mentioned Laura. Laura had a couple really good reps that stood out, and actually more than a couple that stood out in both one-on-ones and in the 7-on-7. Again, we're talking about shorts. But the quickness at his size was really evident. And the third guy was a guy that surprised me, honestly, because I'd seen his reps at Ole Miss last year, and it was, well, he's going to be good depth. But Harris came in, and I thought he was a bit of a revelation with how he moved his feet.
Absolutely.
At that spot, and he's a good 340 pounds. I mean, he came in, he looked like he used the summer to its absolute max. That's a guy that very clearly worked hard to come into camp in really good shape and to come into camp really strong. He moved better than I thought he would. And there's one-on-one that stood out because of how he basically ghosted one of the offensive guards. He was able to slap hands away, and the movement there was really good. So that's promising. I still want to see it with the pads on. Right? I want to see how he holds up when a guy is coming straight at him. But again, it doesn't hurt when you're 330 plus pounds when that happens, and he's anchored. That weight is not in bad spots.
He did not skip leg day.
No.
He has got a tremendous bottom half, and he's built like a fire plug.
Where's Michael Scott when you need him?
I know, really. And but Harris, I think, is a guy. He understands this is his last year. He understands if you're going to make money playing football, then this is it. And now I've got him tickled, and who knows where this goes. But he's going to play. He's going to put pressure on guys we have not mentioned to either step up or sit.
He's going to play starter minutes if this transfers. If what we saw today transfers into pads, he's going to play starter reps.
Absolutely.
Now, that doesn't mean he's going to be the first guy on the field, but he's going to be one of those guys that you can actually split him with one of the starters in 50-50 which is huge for what they're hoping to do with playing more guys, which is another thing that we saw. Which is they rotated more of those guys, and he's in position to be one of the guys that benefits from a bigger rotation.
And let's go ahead and talk about that, because that was going to be our fifth one, I think.
We're at 4.
We're at 4. We're going to skip 4. We're going to flip those because it's relevant, because the way we saw on this field today, they rotated guys in and out nonstop.
And it was the best they've done that since Mac Brown has been here. I don't think Fed ever did that this well either.
He did not. And you saw a guy like Omarion Hampton get reps, but he didn't get nearly the reps that all the other guys, the younger guys.
The freshmen were out there about as much as any of the young guys, and that was true in the secondary. That was true in the defensive line. Everybody got reps, which is what you want early in camp. I mean, I mentioned this before. I said, look, what you want that first week or two of camp, you want to run the wheels off those young guys to kind of let the older guys kind of work their way in and not get hurt. And they did a good job of that in this.
And I was concerned about guys standing around not getting reps. You said don't worry about reps. Mac talked about getting just so many people reps out here. And it was a nonstop carousel of guys getting in, and doing things on the field. I saved the best for last because I think this is a position group that will be the best on the team, besides running back.
And defensive end, maybe. You got 3 really good positions.
They're strong across the board. Kamen Rucker, he's going to be one of those guys. Omarion Kamen Rucker that we'll probably talk about every week. But I think the secondary is going to be really good.
And that's the other reason that the quarterback struggled once they actually got to not throwing against air. And again, it wasn't always clean even against air. And there were some drops.
There were way too many drops today.
There were way too many drops. And there were drops against air on good throws against air, not always by the receivers who are going to play the most. So that's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, but they say they want to play a ton.
That's right. So
and if you want to be, they've got 13 receivers that can play college football. They're going to play 8, and if you want to be in that quality depth, you cannot drop passes. Yep. And we saw too much of that today. But let me ask you about the secondary as far as Elijah Huzzy. Marcus Allen looks bigger and stronger. I think Caleb Cost is going to surprise people. Yep. I know Caleb Cost is a baseball player, and I know he wants to play college baseball, but if he continues his trend on the football field, that's going to be an interesting decision he's going to have to make. But just talk about what you saw from those guys. Jakeem Harris, the transfer from NC State.
There's a pretty good history of guys being good defensive backs and being able to play baseball at a high level.
We're not talking about that guy, though. It was some kid that went to Florida State a long time ago. But I thought, as a unit, the safeties need to be better at times, but I thought this unit is going to be the unit for the team, especially on defense. And it will help out a lot of other stuff.
Well, the fact is, and this gets back to, once they were not thrown against air, quarterbacks struggled partly because nobody was open.
Yeah. And that was wild how the spring started. Guys couldn't get separation. Then towards the end of spring, people got separation, started making plays. The young guys we talked about, Steve Shipp, Alex Taylor. I think Taylor made a good play today. Those guys were non-existent today against those veterans.
Yep.
And I thought that's going to be big.
Well, and the vets weren't playing as much at the end of spring,
right.
Remember. So
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
Part of it. But you get those vets out there, and this secondary is going to be one of the 3 or 4 best in the ACC, I think. I think this is going to be, the overall strength of the defense is the ability to cover at those corner positions. I think they've got a couple guys that can play nickel well. You mentioned Caleb Cost. They've got some guys that they're going to have some flexibility to bring pressure, and we saw a bunch of it today.
From
when they went into team, this was not one of those we're going to start out vanilla days.
Yeah.
Right? Unless your vanilla has all sorts of other toppings on it.
Sprinkles.
Right? This has got sprinkles and, Nutella and, whatever else you got in there.
Ooh, Nutella. Even the first day, though, the point being, Jeff Collins did not hold back.
No.
I mean, they
brought a bunch.
From all angles, shape, sizes, and angles, they were all coming. And I thought the common theme is the quarterbacks, and we'll circle it back to what everybody talks about, is the quarterbacks are going to get better against everything they're going to see. They're going to have to.
Yep.
Because come Minnesota, North Carolina's going to need to trot one out. And all of this stuff with the defensive line showing up, the secondary providing some coverage. There were times last year, and especially a couple of years ago, that receivers were wide open from the get-go. That's not going to happen against Jeff Collins unless there's just a completely blown assignment. But your overall thoughts on what you saw today?
This is just a very different team than what we've seen in Chapel Hill the last few years. And one of the things that here's some crazy talk.
I'm thinking
after shorts, right?
This is Jason, folks. Jason Staples.
Here's the question: do you think that this year's team is going to be better on the offensive or defensive side of the ball based on what you saw today?
This is a very
and what you know about the personnel from what we've seen in pads. I'll just say this.
I think the defense is going to be better.
This is a more balanced football team.
I'll give you that.
Than it has been in a few years. It's a team that I think they're going to be able to cover most teams they play. They're going to be able to give some teams. They're going to be able to amp up the pressure at times because they've got guys that can actually do that on the defensive line, and they've got a coach who's going to sell out because he knows he can cover on the back end.
Such a key.
Right? And if you know that guy can cover that guy and that guy can cover that guy, there's a whole lot of stuff you can do in here that you can't do otherwise.
Yep.
And because of that, because of some of the other pieces, it's going to be really interesting to see how balanced this team can be. I still have some concerns about, how well they're going to be able to stop the run at times against some of the best teams on the schedule. But some of the guys, again, you look at Laura, you look at Cowan, you look at Harris, adding those guys in, if they can play to their maximum, that'll help against the run. So you take that together with they're going to be a run-heavy team on offense. That is an enormous offensive line, right? We haven't even gotten to that. If we were going to do a bonus number 6,
yeah, we're going to talk about. They are tremendous.
It's that on the hoof in shorts. That's a really impressive set of bodies. It's a more impressive set of bodies than they've had in Chapel Hill in a while.
Yeah.
They're still, I mentioned to you, I kind of trust 3.5 of them right now. But that's not too bad for this stage. And I think you've got enough that you can build with there to be pretty balanced. Now it's just a matter of, can the trigger man fit into that balance, and can he stir the drink acceptably well to basically make it all gel?
Yep.
And that's going to be the key. But I think this is a more balanced football team than what we've seen. It's just too, it kind of comes 1 year too late, given, if you put Drake May out here with this bunch, with that offensive line, with what you're seeing on the defensive side, I do wonder what that would have looked like. But what might have been.
We're looking forward.
Dunk City, baby.
I do want to make a note about one of the offensive linemen, Zach Greenberg, the D3 transfer from Muhlenberg County. Mac thinks they found a gem. He snapped today. He did well snapping the ball. He
Not a single problem on any snap I saw.
He, according to Mac and what we thought watching him, he did not appear scared. He was not out of place, and that is a big deal for a D3 guy to step up, to be able to be in that 8 that they talk about. And you've got Austin Blasky will be the starting center, and he will be the leader of the offensive line. But if you've got a guy that can come in and competently snap the football, and we saw that in the bowl game. As Jason says, the postseason scrimmage, snapping the football can become an issue. And Greenberg certainly looked very solid at doing that. A ton of guys played today. A ton of guys got reps. There's a ton of Inside Carolina coverage coming your way. There's also Johnny T-Shirt and JohnnyT-Shirt.com that sponsors us.
Whew.
There's also Congruity and CongruityHR.com.
I don't know what to do with my hands.
I'm confused too. I just stand here like this. Let's wrap this one up. Appreciate everybody taking care of it. We always have fun with it, folks. Hope you enjoyed listening to 5 Takeaways. If you have any questions for Jason and I, we'll be doing this all preseason. We'll be doing this all season with all your familiar podcasts right here at Inside Carolina. And make sure you check out Jim Hawkins' photos, Adam, Evan, Jeremiah, all their written content. Michelle kicking out all the stuff, Ben captaining on, of course, El Jefe, Buck Sanders playing puppets.
Nobody does it better.
And John Bowman's videos, just amazing coverage. It felt like we drove an IC bus, folks, here today, and everybody piled out of it. What a great day. Thanks, everybody.